Victoria has recorded a further 466 coronavirus infections in the past 24 hours. 12 more deaths have been recorded, including a man aged in his 30s. 6 of the fatalities are linked to aged care. 636 people are in Victorian hospitals. Premier Daniel Andrews says stabilising case numbers are a positive sign. Restrictions are preventing the virus from spreading exponentially.
I would just ask Victorians to appreciate that if we don't drive down movement, if we have anywhere near the normal number of people moving around Melbourne, whether it be going to work, to school, to childcare, to kinder and everything else in between, we just won't drive these numbers down. And I'll take you right back to where we started on last Sunday, that if we continued with stage 3, if we didn't make these heartbreaking and incredibly challenging decisions, then it wouldn't be a 6-week strategy. We'd be pretty well close to Christmas and we would still be seeing hundreds and hundreds of cases each day.
Certainly we're seeing some stabilisation in numbers. We've got 400 to 500 cases each day. That has been more or less the average for the last week. That's not good enough, but it is a positive that we've averted an exponential increase through the last couple of weeks. If we hadn't stabilised these numbers, we would have seen thousands of cases per day, and there are estimates we've averted 20,000 or more cases by virtue of the stage 3 restrictions. But as I say, that hasn't been enough. That's been able to stabilise the numbers, but we cannot have 500 cases every single day and the associated morbidity, hospitalisation, intensive care requirements and deaths that are associated with that number every day.
Travel between New South Wales and Queensland is now restricted to those holding special freight or local resident passes after the border was closed early this morning. Exemptions apply to residents who live in border towns if they hold special passes and carry proof of address. Reporter Bruce McKenzie has more from Tweed Heads on the New South Wales side of the border.
Who would have thought that a state border could create such a state of confusion? Of course, the Queensland-New South Wales border was closed at 1 o'clock this morning. There are exemptions, though, for people living in the so-called border bubbles, like Tweed Heads and Coolangatta right behind me. Yesterday, the Queensland government put out the maps outlining these so-called border bubbles, and one of those borders crossed down into the Byron Shire, which caused a bit of consternation, basically splitting that community in two. Now the maps have been changed and one of those postcodes has disappeared. That's created some confusion. Also, the requirements for passes to cross the border have changed as of 1 o'clock tonight. Talking to some of the police who were manning the border checkpoint here earlier this morning, right in the Tweed Heads Coolangatta CBD, they said up to 50% of the vehicles they were seeing at one stage, even though the drivers were eligible to cross because of where they lived, they didn't have the correct pass. So those cars were pulled into a side street here, and people from the State Emergency Service and the Army helped those people get their paperwork in order so they could proceed.
At 1 o'clock last night, the pass changed. So they stopped us, and now we've got to sit here and wait for a new pass, otherwise we can't get through.
I've just gone to the gym, which is right on the corner, and I just live on the other side, and I've just got to get a new border pass. I've been stopped before, just because living on the border it happens, but yeah, I think it's a little bit inconvenient, but necessary, I guess, to keep everyone safe.
The good news is that the extraordinary traffic jams that we saw last night in the lead-up to that hard border closure, at one stage out on the Gold Coast motorway and the Gold Coast highway, there were delays of between 70 and 90 minutes. Well, those traffic jams have largely disappeared today. Just a few minutes, about 5 minutes to get through the border checkpoint on the highway that we saw early this morning. Some of the fine details are still being worked out. Some of those border bubble boundaries are still causing some concern. There are now questions being asked about why some of the Tweed Shire won't be exempt while others closer to the border will be. Just goes to prove that you can't please all of the people all of the time.
New South Wales has recorded 9 new cases of COVID-19 since yesterday, the state's first single-digit rise in more than 2 weeks. Of the new infections, 2 are returned international travellers. 4 were locally acquired and 3 are under investigation with no known source. 2 of the mystery cases are close contacts of each other. One of the infections is a student of Tangara School for Girls in Cherrybrook, which has been closed for cleaning, and contact tracing is underway.
Isolation is mandatory for anyone identified as a close contact of a case. Anyone directed to undertake a 14-day self-isolation period must stay in isolation for the full time, even if they test negative. Early testing may not detect an infection, and release from self-isolation based on a negative test can allow an infectious person to infect others in the community.